cash back in that kind of situation. You have to return the actual goods. Yes, I
Yeah.
guess there's some situations where you can say you sold me something good. I can prove it wasn't good, and I don't have to actually return it to you. Like you can say you can get like credit. Someone okay, like you get something from a grocery store. You get home, it turns out the food is spoiled. You take a picture of it, you send it back to the grocery store. You don't have to return the spoiled milk or something, and then they give you like some credits to take the milk, but you don't actually get to actually drink the milk and enjoy the milk, and then say like get some cash back for giving us it. So I was thinking there should be some kind of system where it says, okay, if you've paid back your loans for 50% of the degree that you took, of the cost of the credits, then you get that money forgiven, but that degree goes back. And the degree can go back does not necessarily mean you'd be fired from the job that you have, because many people are not really even working in the field that they got the degrees. And also, if someone has employed you and trained you, they don't really care that much. But you shouldn't be able to just still call yourself a doctor this, doctor that, if you've actually decided to like forgive that amount of money back. So I think there could be something like that that can be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, kind of, I mean, I'm in favor of just allowing, I think broadly, I think the solution here maybe just be to allow more alternatives like Praxis and other things.
Mm-hmm.
Some people talked about doing more a la carte education ideas, like maybe pay to take certain classes and get like a certification for that class. So it like would be
Yeah.
cheaper. And then if you need to go back and get more, you can, but it's like you can kind of build up your resume with different classes rather than, okay, you go to a place for 4 years, you use some of it, most of it's worthless, and then, that's it. Because it's like, we talked about in the Ivory Tower series, but about people being funneled into English and other classes because they're basically creating jobs for faculty members. It's not like everyone's going to use it when they come out. In fact, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think also another system that could be done is a payment system. Just have a
Yeah.
payment system where you don't get the money up front, where the
Yeah.
money is paid for like an actual service. Because they do this like with loans and cars and things. Like when you give a car, someone's like, okay, this car is, you have an agreement with the person selling you the car that this car is
Yeah.
actually going to be useful over a certain amount of time. And if something is wrong with the car, you shouldn't have to just pay for it all up front. Yes, you can buy a car straight cash. So crash from the beginning, but that's up to you. If you're actually doing that, then you're not actually owing someone back. But just have like a system where this works together with the banks and the schools. Where first of all, you'd have to get the government out of the system. This is
Yeah.
now estimating that the state isn't in there. The state isn't in there demanding banks must give loans to certain people. The banks can set this. Think about a more free market type of environment. A bank would be able to set whichever standards it wants to who actually gets the loans, or private entities will be able to like say, okay, I'm going to fund this person this amount of money for it. But then the school will say, I'm providing this level of education for this student. And I'm confident enough to say, like, just pay me the basic amount I need to cover paying the teachers and supplying the location and whatnot in order to actually teach this kid. So
Yeah.
let's just say, okay, they say this degree is going to cost you $20,000. But to teach you this, I need at least $10,000 to pay the teachers and the electricity and all this. So I'm going to take the $10,000, and if you can't pay the 20K off the break, I'll set amount and say like, okay, the 20K is going to be now with an interest up to like $2,200 or $20,000. Yeah, $22,000. We're going to say that's it because we're going to put that 10% interest on that situation, and then you have an understanding to say like we are so sure that this thing is valuable of the 20K. So they'll actually incentivize more students to not pay it upfront and take this payment system because they'll understand that in a system of you paying me back, they'll say, I guarantee that when you graduate from this job, you'll have a 100K job. So all we're going to do is take a certain percent, take 10% of your pay for your first 10 years after you graduate. Then once they take that 10%, that will be automatically coming into them. And then that will pay off more than that $22,000. Or they can say, if you pay us back that $22,000, whenever you pay us that back, it's done. Then whatever else is like 10% for the like. So they have that kind of agreement where they can set up that system. Then the banks will make sure that, or a private person will make sure that if we're going to loan this person the money to pay that initial 10,000, they're also somebody who will be able to earn. They've shown us, they've proven to us that they'll be able to actually pick, first of all, a school that's going to teach you something that's worth it. They know there's jobs in here. You'll have systems and you have businesses working like they work with Praxis that they'll actually be in touch with the actual education system, the schools, or they'll have smaller pods of education you'll actually be learning at the actual business. You'll be employed at the business will sign it. This is something they used to do. The business will sign a contract and say, since you're contracted to work with us, we'll actually pay for your school and things like this. So there can be other systems like this where these things can work. And there's other countries in the world where some of these things work. Even in the United States of America, there's certain levels of businesses and jobs that these things still work. Somebody will be very useful to like a law firm, very useful to like a certain sort of business. They'll go in for extra learning. I had a friend here who was working for Oracle, and they paid for him to go to India for like a year and learn some new course because he was actually going to help them. And then he came back here, and now he's establishing that in East Africa. So this kind of systems work. This whole idea of just the K through 12 pipeline directly into school, I think there's part of that. There's also the K through 12 thing goes into there. Of course, we saw the Project Veritas thing with his indoctrination, the political leanings of people in the school indoctrination complex. The amount of donations they give is like 95% Democrat, and it's not just middle range Democrats, like regressive, left leaning, really type of activist type of thing. So I think there is an incentivized to keep those people in that system. Of course, we've talked about the dilution of just the jobs and things like that, the inflation, where people are like stuck in certain jobs. So they want to, I think, retard how soon people can enter the job market because they want less competition for those fewer jobs that they have in these different markets and things like this. We talked about the make work boondoggle jobs of the people who are employed in the schooling indoctrination complex. So right now, with the state involvement into it, of course, the votes and the systems like that, the more reliant you keep people on it, the government, I think you'll see people in the government have a higher percentage of liberal arts degrees employed in government positions than you have like in the private sector. So it's also a funding system for creating government bureaucrats and things. So it's this right now it's just a mess, but we get some basic solutions. I'm open to seeing the other solutions people have out there, or maybe we'll come back with more solutions. Like think about things because that's something that I've thought of, that system of the school agrees that they will not necessarily be paid all up front, but their payment comes from guaranteeing or from investing more in your solution after. Because most colleges don't really give a damn about what you do after unless they're raising money. And I think that's one of the things I think James Lindsay and other people have talked about, where the actual change is finally going to happen now that schools are being exposed and the donors are starting to see like, wait, who's teaching at my school, or what kind of degree, or you're spending this much money on what kind of thing? Because it's still I mean, there's a lot of government money coming to schools, but still a majority of even public state schools have a lot of funding from private sector people who they also like this because they have prestige, because they still have their job, they're still achieving their job, but they want to be able to like, oh, I went to Harvard Law School. That's still like top thing that you want to be able to say, oh, I went to Georgia, I went to the University of Georgia in this department. But if they start seeing that University of Georgia is dropping in the standards, they lose the prestige of being among their friends. And that's those circles we're talking about, like Lizzo and the Meghan Markles, of showing off and saying, oh, I went to Wharton Business School. If Wharton Business School is now just no longer a word that they can throw around, that's a less kind of thing they can hold up as as a shiny type of thing. So I think that's one of the things that will help reduce some of this, raise the standards again. But do you think that's even something that's happening? What are your
I would
thoughts
say that's happened already because, like I mentioned before, with legacy admissions and affirmative action and stuff, and it's backlash because, like, I have a friend. I guess he's mixed race technically. He's black, he's Native American, a few other things, and he talked about how in academia a certain percentage of people thought he was an affirmative action hire off the bat. And the thing is, he's competent at what he does, but it's like, but now there's that stigma because it's okay. Is this person here because they're good, or were they just here to fill some quota? And I understand the argument against this, that in the past it was like, okay, if you were black, you had to jump through all these hoops to get through academia. I understand that. But it's like it went so far in the other direction that now it's like, okay, were you just pushed through because we didn't want lawsuits? And I forget if I think it was James Lindsay too, who had a story where he was talking to a black kid about his time in school, and he was saying how he intentionally got things wrong, and he saw that the teachers were afraid to correct him because they didn't want to be accused of bigotry. But it's like, that he did that intentionally to see how they'd react. And if they're doing this regularly, it's like, what does that say about the standards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also just the general things. Another negative thing that happens from the schooling system is if people are incentivized to have quotas to let certain people in, drop the standards in. I experienced teaching here in Kenya. I was teaching some illustration and animation courses. I had some students who had grown up in Nairobi, the capital city here, who were aware of computers their whole life. I had some students who were in university from the village, so they were just taking an arts degree. So trying to teach somebody who's never actually even opened a basic app, understands shortcuts like Control C, Control V, or like how to
Yeah.
save a file, versus people who know more about apps than even I do. So trying to teach them how to use Flash animation, it's the difference of the level because you don't have the ability to really choose and select a certain group of people who are already interested and aware at a basic level about this certain thing. So the system is already at that point where those kids would be better off if they were at a lower level course, just learn the basics of computing. It would be better off if me as a teacher, I had the ability to select and say, I'm only going to teach students that have achieved this level of awareness that fits what I want to teach them. But that system is not the system that you have here. So you have people
No.
saying, I have to take those kids. So you have colleges saying, okay, you have to take these kids into a certain school. And that kids is also having his time wasted. Because if you're like, okay, now we'll just do it halfway. The people who are more advanced, they have to bring their stuff down. They're not going to learn as much. The people who are really below the qualifications, they're not even going to be able to achieve that. And then they might get dissuaded from even learning computers, learning animation, and they might drop out of the field completely. And we see this in schools. Some kids are taken to certain schools where they don't graduate and then they get dejected and they might have been able to still be in that field, still been able to give back to their community and things like that if they had gone to a level of teaching that was more at a more remedial level that could teach them the basics and then they'd work up to that level instead of just getting at that high level and being dissuaded from it. So this is something that we also kind of see. And then now it starts going like, oh, people from these certain communities seem to drop out more and all these are the stupid people. It's like, no, they're not stupid. They just happen to
Yeah.
be put in a situation where they weren't given the best kind of tools for their trade. It's kind of like if we all of a sudden said every NBA team had to take on 3 Asians in every practice. It doesn't, and the Asians kept not making teams. It's not that we'd say like, oh, Asians suck at basketball. It's just like there's not that many Asians who are just really that good at basketball, but doesn't mean Asians can't play basketball. It doesn't mean there's no level of playground basketball that Asians couldn't achieve. So that's the kind of thing that where I think this incentivizing people to take things that they don't need to do, and of course this is a debt trap that people are just that's one of the unfortunate things about this because regardless of what we're talking about here, people do have debts. This 600 what's 600 800,000 people with over $300,000 in student loan, or is it over $200,000 in student loans? Who are these people? What are they doing? Like that's an unfortunate. Like I don't think you can think this is a healthy system that can get that many people in this much debt.
Yeah. And it's like they always give me this thing about good intentions and people should have the chance and all that, but it's just like people are not equal. It's like, I mean, math I've struggled with. It's like you put me at MIT, I'm gonna fail easily. I know that.
Yeah.
It's like it just means you have to do a better job of figuring out what.
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.